Hello, BookTube. Today is the 7th day of my channel, so like God, I have decided to rest from my World War One stuff and do the BookTube newbie tag questions, or at least some of those questions. Because it is a relaxed video, I have my cup of tea in my General Montgomery mug from the We Have Ways of Making You Talk podcast store. I'm not no sponsorship, but I recommend We Have Ways of Making You Talk. It's a good World War II podcast hosted by Al Murray and James Holland, the historian. So let's start with the first question. Why did you start this channel? Well, I've been talking to a number of people about starting a BookTube channel for ages, but a combination of laziness and concern about whether you could do one without knowing how to edit in detail, without being able to put lots of interesting graphics about and etc. Because that's what I see a lot of the time when I look at BookTube. And then I realised you didn't need any of that. You just needed a camera, a way of talking that people could hear, and something to talk about. And I fixed on November because for 3 years previous to this year, I'd been doing something I call Remembrance Reads. Nobody else seems to be doing it very much. It's not something well, we'll talk about that later. And that was focusing on mainly reading World War One related books in November. And I thought that's the ideal time to start my channel. I can start with a subject that I know something about. As I said in a couple of other videos, I'm not an expert. My history degree, I graduated in 1992, so a lot of historical writing has passed under the bridge since then, and I haven't been doing any academic type work. I'm just an interested reader, and so yeah, so I thought let's launch it in November. I wasn't initially planning to do one every day, but I had such a backlog of people and things I wanted to talk about that it seems to have gone that way. Whether it will continue that way for the rest of November is moot. I think I have enough subjects to talk about. I still want to do two recommendations videos, one for memoirs and one for history. I'd like to also do possibly one about fiction. Actually, fiction is the subject from World War One about which I probably have the least say. And there's other writers I'd like to talk about. I'd like to move it. I've done a lot of poetry in the first week. I'd like to move it mainly because in parenthesis is the key text for the reason for this channel, really. But I'd like to move on in the rest of November and do some other stuff. So that's why I decided to start this channel. And other people were encouraging me to do so, probably to their immense regret at this point. So I should thank them at some point in this video. And also, I've watched people like Steve Donahue, who doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but can talk in. I mean, I am no Steve Donahue, but I like the fact that he can talk about books without needing all the bells and whistles of editing and tarting about. So there's that. Next question. What are some fun, unique things you can bring to BookTube? Well, that's a good question. A breadth of reading. I'm not necessarily going to say a depth of reading. One of my reasons I wanted to do this channel was because I worry that my reading is broad but shallow, and that I have over the years, because I read quite quickly, not as quickly as some people, because I still do this reading it out loud in your head thing. I feel sometimes that I storm through books and don't think about what I'm reading much. It's not that I want numbers. Numbers isn't important to me. And I don't understand this fetishization with numbers, or if I want to read 1,000 books in a year, I will do so, but I'll do it by using either by skip reading the whole thing, or jumping or reading one of those terrible things that just dilutes books down to 2 pages and feeds you that, and you can pretend you've read the book. So hopefully I can bring a breadth of reading and a breadth of stuff, and a little bit of humour, possibly, um, and um, and I read quite eclectically. That's not the right word. It is the right word, maybe, but I would want to bring some sort of. And also, the one thing I do want to bring is I want to bring more non-fiction. There are people that do non-fiction, BookTube, and I follow some of those. But I really want to sort of try and focus more on stuff that is less read. Just because there are loads of people out there doing all the popular stuff who are younger, funnier, more interesting than me. So I will be bringing the boring stuff. What are you most excited for about this new channel? Well, one of the reasons I wanted to do it was because is to, as I said, to deepen my reading, and I think one of the ways I can do that is having to explain to other people about what I'm reading and why I'm reading it and what I'm getting out of it. One of the best ways to learn stuff is to teach it to other people, and so that's what I'm excited for. Just using this channel to help me understand my reading better, and for it to stay in my head better. I know it's in there because if I'm required to pull it out in a game of Trivial Pursuit, I can pull it out in a game of Trivial Pursuit. But I'm not sure that's the best way to judge how effective a reader you are. Why do I love reading? Here's the thing. I don't know if I do love reading, but reading is one of those things that I do because I've always done it. Reading to me is like breathing, sleeping, watching Doctor Who. They're things I've done for as long as I can remember, and I enjoy reading, and I enjoy reading some things more than others. But I don't know if I'm honest if I can say do I love reading. I must do because I read a lot, but I never think of it in those terms. I enjoy reading, and I enjoy talking about books. If that's love, then that's love. But perhaps I've overthought that one a bit. What book or series got you into reading? Well, going back to the last question, I've read for as long as I can remember. There is the picture that will be the thumbnail for this video has a little picture of me as a baby, black and white, with a little cardboard book in my hand. And my mum tells me that when I was young, they could take me to parties, and they could sit me in a corner with a little book, cardboard book, and I would just sit there silently and go through it. So lots of different things got me into reading. When I was younger, about sort of junior school age, I read a lot of non-fiction to the point at which the school called my parents in to explain that I needed to read more fiction because all this non-fiction I was reading was probably damaging my social skills because I wasn't reading books to talk about in class. So I used to read things like there used to be books like 1,000 How, What, When, Whys, and things like the boys' handbooks and things, which were lists of capital cities of the world and how to tie knots, none of which I can remember now. But also, I was reading fiction. I just wasn't reading. I would read anything basically. If I went to my nan used to read westerns, and she had a lot of romance books, and I would read those because I'd read anything. It was all more. I think the thing was just to get information into my head, just to feed me with words, and so I don't think there is a single book that I can say got me into reading. I know that The Hobbit got me into reading fantasy. We did it at schooling when I was in Cornwall, and once I'd read The Hobbit, I went straight on to Lord of the Rings, and I binge read that. Admittedly, skipping some bits because I was too young in a long weekend, and thereafter I read lots of fantasy and science fiction. Doctor Who was the main contributor to me reading science fiction. until the early 90s, and then for some reason I sort of stopped reading lots of fantasy and science fiction and moved on into reading other types of books. I always read non-fiction. I always read lots of history. I always read lots of biographies and those kind of things, but I didn't read a huge amount of fiction. In fact, I didn't read a lot of classics apart from the ones I had to read at school. Until the mid-90s, because although I was aware of the plots of a lot of them, because I used to get a magazine when I was a young kid called Look and Learn, and Look and Learn was like one of these things. It would have articles about like how hovercraft worked. It would have articles about battles and about famous people, and then it would have two comic strips. It had a science fiction comic strip called The Triggered Empire, which was amazing, but it also had an ongoing graphic novel of a classic work of literature. The two I most remember are Lorna Doone and Ivanhoe. So I picked up a lot of what passes for knowledge of classics from there. But it was only sort of in the mid-90s when after school, when I really started to read classic literature. And that's partly because I met people that were really into, especially Victorian literature. And then with BookTube, I started reading. When I discovered that existed, I started reading more and more. So short answer is probably The Hobbit. What challenges do you think starting a BookTube channel will be hardest to overcome? Consistency. I'm full of enthusiasm. Consistency, I should say, consistency over the long term. I am full of enthusiasm and information for this first month. The question will be how things go after that. And I would like to improve the quality of of what I'm doing in terms of editing and picture, but that will come with time, and graphics, because I would really like to be able to put, because I read a lot on Kindle, being able to put the cover photos up in the video would be great. But yeah, the long-term consistency is going to be the challenge. When did you start to read? Well, I think I've already answered that question. As I've been reading for as long as I can remember being able to read. Whether the initial reading of cardboard books wasn't probably reading, it was looking more than reading. But I've been reading since I can remember, and hopefully I won't stop till I die. Where do you read? Everywhere and anywhere. This is these four walls are my room. I spend a lot of time in here reading. I have my bed is behind me. You can't quite see it, but basically my room is like having a bed in a library, which if you told that to my 12-year-old self, I would have been absolutely chuffed. It seems at the age of 53 to be slightly disappointing, but there you go. What kind of books do you like to read? Predominantly, I almost want to say anything, but I definitely read a lot of non-fiction. I read a lot of poetry, although this year I haven't read as much, because I haven't had the money to buy poetry books, which are, for understandable reasons, quite expensive per page, certainly. But I want to do poetry stuff on this channel at some of it's been, this week's been World War poets, but I'd like to do some more sort of contemporary poetry stuff as we go on, because I think that is one thing that BookTube doesn't seem to cover in a great detail. I read fiction, classics, and contemporary fiction. The last few years, I've read a lot more contemporary fiction, which is probably to do with the Booker Prize and a place called Plek. I'm not sure I actually like contemporary fiction very much when I think about it. I do like some. I think for every 10 contemporary fiction books I read, I think one of them is brilliant. I think a couple of them are fine, and the rest of them are very bang average or bad. The fact that a book as bad as Prophet Song could have won the Booker Prize kind of makes me think the Booker Prize doesn't know what it's doing. But that's a subject for another day. What does your book collection look like? Well, you can see some of it, but not all of it. It's here, behind me there, this little shelf here. There's another set of shelves like that on the other side. What you can't see is where that black bookcase is here. Oh, here. There is a whole 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 shelf bookcase that is about 5 feet long that my dad built me, and that's got about 500 books on it. But you can actually mostly see there's some in cupboards under things, but mostly it's on here. It's not very well organized. That top shelf there is poetry, but everything is very disorganized. I'd love it to be more organized, but the effort to do that is gonna be too much for me to do without help. You'd have to. I'd love it to be either in publication order or in alphabetical order by author. But at the moment, it's mostly sort of in sort of random. As I said, the top thing is poetry is poetry. You can see that like Penguin Modern Classics have got a little section of their own there. New York Review of Books have got a section of their own there. That's Dostoevsky. That's Ian Banks and Ian M. Banks. That's Penguin Poetry Collections at the top of that black shelf there. Then Proust's underneath the vintage edition. And then that's just random shit, basically. Sorry for the swear word. Behind those books is also my Doctor Who DVD collection. They're sort of double stacked. But yeah, that's what my book collection looks like. And that concludes the votes of the sorry, that concludes the questions in the BookTube Newbie selection, whatever the proper word is. I hope that's been of interest. I know I've waffled on for a long time, which is going to be a problem going forward. Perhaps that's a challenge I should face. But I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and have a good day. Thanks. Bye bye.